I am Sabrina, 32 years old, and until last week, I was the senior automation engineer at Quantum Digital Solutions. 6 years of building systems that saved the company millions, only to hear those cold words from our VP. We're optimizing you out of the workflow, effective immediately. He had no idea what was coming. The next morning, our 5 million follower company accounts were all renamed Steve's Journey into Sourdough. The look on his face when he called me absolutely apoplectic almost made losing my job worth it. Before I dive into how I turned my corporate nightmare into the sweetest revenge, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever wanted to stand up to workplace injustice. My journey into automation wasn't accidental. I graduated from MIT with a computer science degree, focusing on systems automation, even back in college. While other students were building simple apps, I was creating scripts that automated my dorm's laundry notification system. My professors often said I had a unique talent for seeing inefficiencies and eliminating them through code. That talent earned me multiple job offers before graduation, but Quantum Digital Solutions stood out with their innovative approach to business solutions. QDS marketed itself as the future of enterprise technology. Their recruitment pitch emphasized collaboration, innovation, and that mythical work-life balance everyone searches for. Michael Reynolds, the CEO, had built a reputation as a visionary in the tech industry. During my interview, he spoke passionately about creating tools that would free humans from digital drudgery. It resonated with everything I believe technology should accomplish. "We want people who can think beyond the current limitations," he told me. "Your automation focus is exactly what we need." I accepted their offer despite it being $10,000 less than competitors. The culture seemed worth the trade-off. For the first 2 years, that decision appeared completely justified. My contributions began making an impact almost immediately. Within 3 months, I automated the client reporting system, saving the account management team 30 hours every week. By the end of my first year, I had streamlined internal workflows that reduced project delivery times by 20%. The company recognized my work with an Innovation Star Award and a modest bonus. Thomas Wilson, my direct supervisor, gave me increasing autonomy. "Just keep doing what you're doing," he would say. "The executives are noticing your impact." Thomas was pleasant but conflict avoidant. He preferred sending emails to having difficult conversations, a trait that would later become problematic. Richard Bennett joined as VP of Operations during my second year. Initially, he seemed impressed by my work. "Your automation expertise is exactly what we need to scale," he told me during our first meeting. He had come from a larger tech firm and brought enterprise-level experience that the company valued. Richard was polished, politically savvy, and ambitious. He had a talent for using corporate jargon to sound impressive in meetings while saying very little of substance. Amanda Parker worked in the project management office and became my closest ally. She had been at QDS for 5 years and understood the unwritten rules. "Watch your back with Richard," she warned me over lunch one day. "He has a history of taking credit for other people's innovations." I dismissed her concerns. "My work speaks for itself," I replied. "The systems have my digital fingerprints all over them." "Just document everything," she advised. "Trust me on this." Around my third year, QDS began pursuing larger enterprise clients, requiring significant overhauls of our existing systems. I recognized an opportunity and spent weekends developing what I called the Cloud Automation Framework, or CAF. This system would allow us to quickly deploy customized solutions for enterprise clients while maintaining efficient resource utilization. When I presented CAF to the executive team, Michael called it revolutionary. Richard nodded along, asking technical questions that demonstrated limited understanding of the actual mechanics. Still, the framework was approved for implementation, and I spent the next 6 months refining it into the backbone of our enterprise offering. The success of CAF earned me an informal title among colleagues, the Automation Wizard. Clients began specifically requesting demonstrations of our automation capabilities. I turned down 2 recruitment offers from competitors, believing I was building something significant at QDS. My loyalty seemed appreciated until I noticed subtle shifts in company dynamics. The first real warning sign came during an executive presentation about our technical capabilities. Richard presented my cloud automation framework to potential investors without mentioning my name once. When asked about the development team, he vaguely referred to our talented engineers. When I brought this up to Thomas, he advised me not to make waves. "Richard is bringing in major funding with those presentations," he explained. "The whole company benefits." The culture was changing too. The collaborative atmosphere gradually transformed into something more competitive. New hires seemed selected more for political acumen than technical skills. Then Stephanie Clark joined supposedly as a general software engineer, but I quickly noticed she was being assigned to shadow many of my projects. Just helping her get up to speed, Thomas explained when I questioned this. She has potential. I tried to be a good mentor to Stephanie, sharing knowledge openly. She asked detailed questions about my automation processes, took copious notes, but shared little about her own background. When I asked about her previous experience with automation, she gave vague answers about various projects. Something felt off, but I couldn't quite identify what. Meanwhile, QDS was growing rapidly. We expanded from 50 employees to over 200 in 18 months. My automation systems were scaling to support this growth, but I noticed my influence in decision-making was inversely proportional to the company's expansion. Meetings where I was once a key contributor now happened without my knowledge. "We didn't want to waste your valuable time," became Richard's standard explanation. I still believed in the company's mission and my role in it. The systems I built were becoming increasingly essential to operations. Client testimonials frequently mentioned the efficiency of our automated processes. I continued improving CAF, adding sophisticated machine learning components that could predict resource needs and automatically adjust allocations. But as my technical contributions grew, my inclusion in strategic decisions diminished. The disconnect was becoming impossible to ignore, setting the stage for what would become the most challenging period of my professional life. The first major crack in my professional confidence came after QDS won the Horizon contract, a Fortune 500 client worth millions in annual revenue. During the final presentation, I demonstrated how our automation systems could reduce their operational cost by 30%. The client's CTO was visibly impressed, asking technical questions that I answered confidently. After we won the contract, Michael sent a company-wide email praising the team effort, but specifically mentioned Richard's leadership in showcasing our technical capabilities. The following Monday, Richard called an all-hands meeting to announce a team restructuring. To better serve our growing enterprise clients, he explained, displaying an organizational chart that showed a new enterprise solutions division under his direct control. My position was notably absent from the leadership tier, despite my systems being central to the enterprise offering. After the meeting, I approached Richard. "I noticed the automation team isn't represented in the new structure," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Oh, you'll still be doing the same work," he replied dismissively. "We just need to streamline communication channels for clients." He checked his phone while speaking to me, not making eye contact. The following week, I was invited to a strategy session for implementing the Horizon contract. I prepared a detailed proposal for customizing the automation framework for their specific needs. During the meeting, Richard repeatedly interrupted my explanations. "Let's not get too technical," and bore everyone, he said with a practiced laugh. Later, when Stephanie repeated one of my earlier suggestions almost verbatim, Richard nodded enthusiastically. "That's exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need." The pattern continued in email chains. I would contribute detailed technical recommendations that received no response, only to see Richard present the same ideas days later as if they were his own. When I pointed this out in one thread, writing, "As I suggested on Tuesday," Richard quickly replied to all, "Great minds think alike, but let's focus on moving forward rather than who said what." Amanda caught me staring at that email in the break room. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, sitting beside me. "Just watching my contributions get erased in real time," I replied. She lowered her voice. "Richard did the same thing to Jordan in business development last year. By the time he was done, Jordan was pushed out, and Richard had taken over his client relationships. Why doesn't anyone stand up to him? Because Michael thinks Richard walks on water. He's brought in big clients and speaks Michael's language. Technical people like us are just the engine room to them, not the navigation bridge." That conversation was still echoing in my mind when I discovered Stephanie had been granted admin access to all my automation systems without my knowledge. When I questioned Thomas about this, he shrugged uncomfortably. "Richard wants more people familiar with the systems. What if you got hit by a bus?" "There's a difference between documentation and giving someone with 6 months' experience admin access to critical systems," I argued. "Just trying to avoid bottlenecks," Thomas replied, avoiding my eyes. "It's not personal." But it felt intensely personal when the Phoenix project launched. Phoenix was a critical implementation for our largest client, yet requiring complex customization of the automation framework. Despite being the creator of the system, I was scheduled for only 15 minutes during the 4-hour kickoff meeting to explain technical considerations. I found myself working 70-hour weeks to ensure Phoenix would succeed debugging integration issues and optimizing performance while receiving minimal recognition. When the system went live flawlessly, saving the client an estimated $3 million annually in operational costs, the official announcement credited leadership's strategic vision and the dedicated project team. During the launch celebration, I overheard Richard telling the client, "The beauty of our system is that it doesn't rely on any single person. We've built institutional knowledge." He glanced at me while saying this, a subtle smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. The following day, I discovered my access to the executive reporting dashboard had been revoked. When I emailed IT support, they responded that access was now restricted to director level and above, based on new security protocols. Protocols I had never been consulted on despite being responsible for system security architecture. The cumulative stress began affecting my health. I developed insomnia, often lying awake, replaying conversations and meetings, looking for what I could have done differently. I started experiencing tension headaches and found myself grinding my teeth during the day. Following Amanda's earlier advice, I began meticulously documenting everything. I saved emails, recorded meeting notes, and kept a detailed log of my contributions to projects. This documentation became a second job on top of my increasingly demanding primary role. The final disappointment of this phase came when I was reviewing technical documentation for an upcoming client pitch. The comprehensive guides I had created for the automation framework had been edited with my name removed from the architect and primary developer section, replaced with Quantum Digital Solutions engineering team. It was as if they were systematically erasing my connection to the very systems I had built. The systematic erasure of my contributions accelerated over the next few months. I was walking to the break room when I overheard Richard talking to Stephanie in the conference room door slightly ajar. "I need you to learn everything Sabrina does," he said in a low voice. "Document the processes, understand the dependencies, all of it." "What if she notices?" Stephanie asked. "She's too focused on the technical details to see the bigger picture. That's always been her limitation." I froze outside the door, coffee mug clutched in my hand as Richard continued. "Once we have the knowledge transferred, we can implement the restructuring we discussed. The automation systems are too valuable to have a single point of failure." I walked away silently, heart pounding. Single point of failure. The term echoed in my mind. They were planning to remove me once they had extracted what I knew. The next week, meeting invitations that had routinely included me started appearing on my calendar as declined automatically, with notes stating attendee list revised. Critical strategic sessions about systems I had built were happening without me. When I asked Thomas about this, he fumbled through an explanation about streamlining decision-making processes. Then came the email from IT requesting I document all automation processes in detail, including backdoor access points and emergency protocols for a security audit. The request came from a new IT manager I had never met, copied to Richard and Stephanie. No one else from the engineering team received similar requests. I completed the documentation, but deliberately omitted certain technical details about authentication failsafes I had built into the system. These weren't security vulnerabilities, but rather safeguards I had implemented to prevent catastrophic cascading failures if the main authentication systems went down. I wasn't being paranoid, I told myself, just cautious. Amanda noticed my increasingly isolated status. Over lunch off-site, she confided I was told not to be too closely associated with you. By whom, I asked, though I already knew the answer. Richard pulled me aside after I defended your implementation approach in last week's meeting. He said I should be careful about hitching my wagon to declining stars. She looked genuinely worried. "What's going on, Sabrina?" "I think they're planning to replace me," I admitted. "But they need my knowledge first." "Can you talk to Michael? He always appreciated innovation." "His assistant has blocked 3 meeting requests in the past month. Apparently his calendar is perpetually full." After weeks of this treatment, I finally confronted Richard, directly requesting a private meeting. In his office with the door closed, I laid out my concerns. "I've noticed I'm being systematically excluded from meetings about systems I created," I said. "My name is being removed from documentation, and Stephanie seems to be shadowing everything I do." Richard leaned back in his chair, a practiced look of confusion crossing his face. I think you're misinterpreting normal business operations, Sabrina. As we scale, roles naturally evolve. Stephanie is learning various aspects of the business, not just your areas. Then why was my access restricted to systems I built? Security protocols affect everyone. It's not personal. He smiled thinly. Perhaps you're feeling a bit of inventor syndrome. It's common for technical people to feel overly attached to their creations. This isn't about attachment, I insisted. It's about recognition and inclusion in decisions that directly involve my expertise. I'll take your concerns under advisement, he replied, effectively ending the conversation by turning to his computer. That evening, I stayed late reviewing the company's salary database, which I still had access to through my system administration role. What I discovered confirmed my suspicions. Despite creating systems that had become central to the company's success, my compensation was 15% below market rate for my role and experience. Meanwhile, Richard had received 2 substantial raises in the past year. More disturbingly, Stephanie's job title in the internal system wasn't software engineer as I had been told, but Associate Director of Automation Strategy, a title that effectively positioned her to take over my role. My attempt to meet with Michael was intercepted by his executive assistant, who informed me that the CEO is focused on strategic initiatives and investor relations, but offered to pass along any urgent concerns. During the next project review, I watched in stunned silence as Stephanie presented improvements to the automation framework that I had proposed months earlier. Richard nodded approvingly as she outlined her approach, occasionally adding, "This is exactly the kind of innovation we need to prioritize." The following day, a company-wide email announced a new initiative focused on streamlining operations to maintain competitive advantage in challenging market conditions. The corporate speak couldn't hide the implied threat of staffing cuts. Later that week, I discovered someone had accessed my personal development projects stored on the company servers. The access logs showed Richard's credentials. These were weekend projects, experimental automation concepts that weren't part of my official work. The boundary violation felt intensely personal. The social isolation grew as colleagues began avoiding lunch invitations or ending conversations when I approached. Amanda explained in a whispered conversation by the parking garage. "There's a rumor that you're on your way out. People are afraid of being associated with you." The stress culminated in a panic attack after a particularly humiliating meeting where Richard asked me to justify the resource allocation for automation systems. As I began presenting usage statistics showing the enormous efficiency gains, he interrupted. "We need concrete business outcomes, not technical metrics," he said dismissively. "These are business outcomes," I replied, pointing to the client retention figures directly correlated with automation implementation. "Perhaps in engineering terms," he said with a condescending smile. "Let's move on to Stephanie's customer experience analysis." After the meeting, I locked myself in a bathroom stall, my heart racing as I struggled to breathe. The company I had helped build, the systems I had poured my creativity and weekends into, were being taken from me, piece by piece. And there seemed to be nothing I could do about it. The final indignity came when I discovered the security protocols I had designed were being used to limit my own access. Features intended to protect the company from external threats were being weaponized to push me out. An overheard conversation in the kitchen confirmed my worst fears. "She's become difficult," Richard was telling Thomas. "Not a team player anymore, too attached to her way of doing things." "She's still valuable to the team," Thomas offered weakly. "No one is irreplaceable," Richard replied firmly. "The transition plan is already in motion." Despite this clear warning, I spent the final weekend before my termination working on critical updates to the authentication system. Professional pride wouldn't let me deliver anything less than my best work, even as I suspected what was coming. I pushed the updates live Sunday night, closed my laptop, and tried to prepare myself for whatever Monday would bring. Monday morning arrived with a calendar notification I hadn't created. Strategic Personnel Discussion, 9 a.m. Conference Room B. The meeting included Richard, Thomas, and Patricia from Human Resources. My stomach dropped as I read the attendee list. This was it. I considered not going, simply walking out, but some part of me needed to hear them say it. I needed to witness their justification for discarding 6 years of loyalty and innovation. Conference Room B was the smallest meeting room tucked away from the main office area. When I arrived exactly at 9, they were already seated. Patricia's presence confirmed this wasn't a normal meeting. Her carefully neutral expression was practiced professional. Thomas couldn't meet my eyes, and in the corner, partially hidden by the door when I entered, sat Stephanie with a notebook open. "Sabrina, please have a seat." Richard gestured to the chair positioned alone on one side of the table. The setup made it clear them versus me. Richard didn't waste time on pleasantries. "We've been evaluating organizational efficiency across departments." He began, his voice clinically detached. "As part of our strategic restructuring, we're optimizing workflows and eliminating redundancies." I sat silently watching him hide behind corporate jargon. "After careful consideration, we're optimizing you out of the workflow, effective immediately." The words hit like physical blows despite my anticipation. 6 years reduced to optimizing out of the workflow. "Your role has become redundant with our new systems architecture," he continued. "We're consolidating the automation function under the Enterprise Solutions division." Redundant, I finally spoke, my voice steadier than I expected. "I built those systems from the ground up. There isn't anyone else who understands the architecture comprehensively." Patricia slid a document across the table. "We're prepared to offer 4 weeks of severance contingent upon a smooth knowledge transfer and signing this separation agreement." Her voice was professionally sympathetic, a tone likely perfected through dozens of similar meetings. I glanced at the paper without touching it. Knowledge transfer. Richard nodded towards Stephanie, who looked up briefly from her note-taking. "Stephanie will be taking over the automation strategy. We'll need you to bring her up to speed on any undocumented aspects of the systems." "You want me to train my replacement before leaving?" The audacity was breathtaking. "We prefer to think of it as ensuring business continuity," Richard replied. "The severance is contingent on full cooperation with the transition." I noticed a security guard waiting just outside the glass door. They had planned for every contingency, including the possibility that I might make a scene. "How long do I have?" I asked. "We'll need you to sign the agreement today," Patricia began. "No, I mean, how long do I have to collect my things?" A flicker of surprise crossed Richard's face, perhaps expecting more resistance. "Juan from security will accompany you to your desk. We can allow 15 minutes for personal items." 15 minutes. 6 years reduced to a 15-minute window to pack up and leave. "Your system access has already been restricted to basic functions," Richard added. "Standard protocol for technical roles." Of course it had. They had been planning this for months, systematically isolating me while extracting my knowledge. Thomas finally spoke, his voice barely audible. "Your contributions have been valuable, Sabrina. This isn't a reflection on your work." The platitude only made it worse. If my work was valuable, why was I being discarded? As I stood to leave, Richard added one final insult. "Before you go, we need to verify you haven't created any backdoor access points to the systems. It's a security precaution we take with all departing technical staff." The irony was almost laughable. They were worried I might have done exactly what they had been doing, creating secret access to something that didn't belong to them. "Everything is documented in the systems I was instructed to create," I replied coldly. Juan, the security guard, maintained an awkward professional distance as I cleared out my desk. Colleagues averted their eyes as I packed my personal items into a cardboard box provided by HR. 6 years of professional life reduced to a small collection of trinkets, a Mitt mug family photos, a few technical books, and a small plant Amanda had given me for my last birthday. Patricia supervised as I surrendered my badge. "The separation agreement needs to be signed and returned within 48 hours to qualify for severance," she reminded me. As a final humiliation, I watched as Thomas changed my passwords in front of me, locking me out of systems I had built and nurtured for years. "Is there anything else you need to disclose about system access?" Richard asked, appearing at the last moment. "No," I replied simply, though my mind was already racing ahead, understanding what they had missed in their meticulous removal plan. Juan escorted me through the main work area to the elevator. The silence was deafening as I passed rows of desks, former colleagues suddenly fascinated by their screens. Only Amanda met my eyes briefly, a look of genuine sympathy crossing her face before she quickly looked away. In the lobby, Juan awkwardly mumbled, "Sorry about this," before taking my badge and watching me walk through the front doors for the last time. The bright morning sunlight felt surreal after the fluorescent lighting of the office. I placed my box in the passenger seat of my car and sat behind the wheel, hands trembling slightly, as the full impact began to hit me. Tears blurred my vision as I started the engine. I made it only 3 blocks before having to pull over, unable to see through the tears. 6 years, countless late nights and weekends, systems that had transformed the company's capabilities. All of it taken and attributed to others, my contributions systematically erased to make my elimination cleaner. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, cycling through waves of humiliation, rage, and despair. When I finally arrived at my apartment, the emptiness of the space matched the hollowness in my chest. I placed the sad box of office artifacts on my kitchen counter and collapsed onto my couch, emotionally exhausted. That evening, I checked my bank account, calculating how many months I could survive without income. The severance would help if I signed, but the requirement to train Stephanie felt like rubbing salt in the wound. Sleep evaded me that night. I alternated between staring at the ceiling and compulsively checking my email, half expecting some message, acknowledging the mistake, the misunderstanding. Nothing came. Around 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "You deserve better than this." Richard already announced restructuring the automation team under his direct leadership. "He's calling your framework his vision now." That was the breaking point. Something hardened inside me. If they were going to take everything I had built and erase my contributions, perhaps they should understand exactly what they were taking over. Not through destruction, but through a demonstration they wouldn't forget. Morning light brought clarity through the fog of anger and hurt. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, a strange calm, replacing the emotional turbulence of the previous day. If Quantum Digital had been thorough in removing my access, this would end here with nothing but a bitter story to tell future colleagues. But something told me they had missed important details in their haste to push me out. My first test was simple. I navigated to the cloud automation dashboard login page and entered my credentials. Access denied. Expected. But QDS, like many companies, had built their security in layers, focusing primarily on the obvious front doors, while paying less attention to emergency access protocols and system interconnections. I had designed those systems, including the forgotten backdoors intended for emergency recovery scenarios. Had Richard been technical enough to understand these nuances, he might have had the foresight to close these vulnerabilities. His dismissal of technical details was about to become his biggest mistake. I spent the morning carefully testing boundaries, confirming what access remained available. The password reset protocols had missed several authentication chains I had built between systems. While my main accounts were locked, the service accounts used for system-to-system communication still recognized my personal authentication tokens for specific limited functions. A normal employee wouldn't know these existed. A normal employee wouldn't have built them in the first place. As I mapped out the remaining access points, I wrestled with ethical boundaries. I had no intention of causing actual harm to the company's clients or destroying data. That would be criminal, potentially harmful to innocent users, and contrary to my professional ethics. But a temporary, non-destructive demonstration of exactly what happens when you discard the architect of your systems that felt like poetic justice. The cloud dashboard revealed what I suspected: my authentication still worked for the automation testing environment through a legacy connection I had created for disaster recovery. This connection had been overlooked in the termination protocols because it wasn't documented in the standard security guidelines. It existed in my private documentation, designed for true emergencies when normal authentication might be compromised. This wasn't about financial gain or sabotage. This was about visibility, about making my erasure impossible to maintain, about demonstrating exactly what they had thrown away. I discovered an even more interesting oversight: the company's social media integration was still running through my automation systems. During the previous year, I had built an automated social media management tool that scheduled posts, tracked engagement, and maintained consistent branding across platforms. The system had access to all company social accounts, including Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, where QDS maintained a significant presence with over 5 million followers. These social channels were central to the company's marketing strategy and client communications. They were verified accounts that posted official company updates, product announcements, and thought leadership content. And they were still connected to automation routines that recognized my emergency authentication. Project Sourdough began taking shape in my mind. Named after my pandemic hobby that had sustained me through lockdown, this would be a series of timed, harmless, but impossible to ignore changes to company systems. Nothing destructive, nothing permanent, but visible enough, to make a point. The central component would be renaming the company's social media accounts to Steve's Journey into Sourdough, complete with profile pictures featuring artisanal bread. Steve was fictional, of course, a random name chosen for its completely ordinary quality, making the transformation all the more absurd. I carefully programmed a sequence of changes that would activate at specific times, cascading through connected systems in ways that would be difficult to track and reverse without understanding the underlying automation architecture. First, the social media accounts would transform overnight. Each platform would receive slightly different sourdough-themed content, giving the impression of a comprehensive account takeover. The corporate Twitter account would begin live tweeting bread recipes. Instagram would feature close-up photos of sourdough crust with inspirational baking quotes. Facebook would announce a pivot to becoming an artisanal bread consulting firm. Next, the corporate presentation templates stored in the cloud would begin automatically inserting random sourdough images between slides whenever opened. Client-facing dashboards would display normally but include small bread icons in the corner that, when clicked, would open baking tips in a pop-up window. The internal messaging system would auto-replace certain corporate buzzwords with baking terminology. Synergy would become fermentation. Leverage would transform to kneading. Strategic advantage would show as perfect crust. The most sophisticated component targeted the fix attempts themselves. I built an automated response system that would recognize certain command patterns trying to reverse the changes and respond with increasingly elaborate sourdough baking advice. The more aggressive the fix attempt, the more detailed the bread-making instructions would become. I tested each component on an isolated development instance, ensuring they worked as intended without causing permanent changes or data loss. Everything was designed to revert automatically after 1 week, leaving systems exactly as they were before, minus a rather embarrassing corporate social media incident. The final implementation took place at 3 in the morning. I used a VPN and other anonymizing tools, though I knew determined forensic analysis might eventually trace the changes back to me. But proving it would require admitting the security oversights and emergency protocols they had failed to address during my termination. After setting everything in motion, I carefully cleaned my digital tracks as much as possible. The automated changes would begin at precisely 9 a.m., when the office would be fully staffed and clients most active on the corporate accounts. I closed my laptop, made a cup of tea, and tried to process what I had done. Part of me wondered if I had gone too far. Another part felt a profound satisfaction at the elegant technical solution I had implemented. They had erased my contributions and discarded my expertise. Tomorrow they would understand exactly what that expertise entailed. I set my alarm for 8:30 and wanting to be awake when it all began. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized I felt something I hadn't experienced since the first hints of my professional erosion at QDS. A sense of control. My alarm jolted me awake at 8:30 sharp. For a brief disoriented moment, I prepared for my regular commute, before remembering I no longer had a job to go to. The events of the previous day and night came rushing back. I reached for my phone with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. By 8:45, nothing had happened. I began to wonder if my access had been more limited than I thought if my plan had failed before it began. Then at precisely 9, and my phone exploded with notifications. A text from Amanda appeared first. "What is happening to our accounts? Richard is losing it." She followed immediately with screenshots. The Quantum Digital Solutions Twitter account verified blue check, and all was now named Steve's Journey into Sourdough, with a profile picture of a perfectly baked artisanal loaf. The most recent tweet read, "Day 1 of my sourdough starter. I've named him Bubbles. Looking forward to sharing this journey with all 5 million of you. Number Sourdough Steve, number Bread Life." The Instagram and Facebook accounts had undergone similar transformations. The corporate LinkedIn page was now describing QDS as a boutique bread consulting firm specializing in fermentation, optimization, and crust disruption. I couldn't help the laughter that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me. The absurdity of it, the perfect execution, the sheer unexpectedness of a corporate tech giant suddenly becoming obsessed with artisanal bread making was exactly the statement I had intended to make. More texts flooded in from Amanda, who was apparently witnessing the office meltdown in real time. "Emergency, all hands called. Richard looks like he's about to have an aneurysm. IT is frantically trying to access accounts. Every time they try to change it back, more bread content posts automatically. OMG. The client presentation just started projecting sourdough recipes in the middle of the Apex meeting. The chaos was spreading beyond social media. As clients opened their dashboards, confused bread icons appeared. The corporate website header now featured a faint background image of wheat stalks. Internal communications were dissolving into confusion as key terms transformed into baking vocabulary. At 9:30, my phone rang with an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. It was Richard, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "This is Richard Bennett. I know you're behind this, Sabrina. Whatever you've done, undo it immediately or face legal consequences. Call me back within the hour." I didn't call back. Instead, I watched as technology news sites began picking up the story. Quantum Digital Solutions social accounts hacked or elaborate marketing stunt read one headline. Tech giant's bizarre pivot to baking confuses clients announced another. The hashtag number sourdoughgate was trending by lunchtime. Competitors were joining in with one rival company tweeting, "While some focus on bread, we remain committed to actual technology solutions, though we do appreciate a good sourdough." Richard called again at 11 this time, leaving a much less controlled message. "You need to stop this now. The board is involved. The CEO is getting calls from major clients, questioning our security protocols. Fix this, or we will pursue every legal avenue available." I could picture the scene at QDS headquarters, emergency meetings, IT teams working frantically to regain control of systems, executives demanding explanations, clients calling with concerns. The perfectly orchestrated chaos was exposing exactly what I had intended: their vulnerability without my expertise. Amanda's text updates continued throughout the day. They brought in an outside security consultant who says it's the most elegant hack he's ever seen. Not destructive, just utterly public and nearly impossible to counter without understanding the automation architecture. Richard tried to blame IT security, but Michael reminded him that he personally oversaw the automation restructuring, so it's on him. They're telling clients it's an elaborate security drill to test response protocols. Nobody believes it. By late afternoon, things escalated further. The automated response system was working perfectly. Each attempt to force changes to the social accounts triggered new, increasingly detailed bread content. The corporate Twitter was now posting an hour-by-hour documentary of sourdough starter development, with surprisingly engaging narratives about Bubbles the starter and his journey to becoming a full loaf. The company's stock price dropped 7% as investor concerns about security and management competence spread. Technology forums were filled with speculation about the cause, with several anonymous posts claiming to be from current or former employees describing a toxic culture that prioritized politics over technical expertise. At 5 p.m., I received an email from QDS legal department demanding I cease and desist all unauthorized system access immediately and threatening litigation for damages to company reputation and business operations. It was carefully worded to avoid admitting any security vulnerability, while still making it clear they believed I was responsible. I crafted an equally careful response, expressing concern about the company's current social media situation while denying any involvement. I added that proper security protocols should prevent former employees from accessing systems and wished them success in resolving what appears to be a significant technical challenge. Amanda called that evening, speaking in hushed tones. "They've been in emergency meetings all day. Richard is taking most of the heat since he assured everyone the automation transition was seamless." She paused. "Michael actually asked why nobody consulted you before the termination since you built the systems." Richard had no good answer. "Are they going to try to bring me back?" I asked, curious rather than hopeful. "I don't think so. Too much pride involved now. But Richard has been called to the board to explain how this happened on his watch." She sounded genuinely pleased about this development. By the second day, Steve's sourdough journey had become an internet sensation. Memes were spreading across social platforms. Someone created a parody account documenting Bubbles the starter's thoughts on corporate America. Tech blogs were publishing analyses of the incident, with several correctly identifying it as an example of what happens when companies discard technical talent without proper transition. Richard called again, this time with a different tone. "Sabrina, this has gone far enough. Whatever your grievances, this is damaging the company you helped build." His attempt at emotional manipulation was transparent. "We're prepared to offer additional severance and positive references if this stops immediately." I didn't respond. On the third day, client concerns about security escalated. If social accounts could be so thoroughly compromised, what about client data? The company issued a formal statement assuring that all client information remained secure and characterizing the incident as an isolated event affecting only public-facing communication channels. This was technically true as I had deliberately avoided accessing or altering any client data. My issue was with QDS management, not with clients who depended on the services. By day 4, anonymous company reviews began appearing online, detailing a pattern of taking credit for employees' work and pushing out innovators once their ideas had been extracted. Several former employees reached out to me privately, sharing similar experiences with Richard's management style. Industry insiders began privately messaging me with job opportunities. Anyone who could implement something this sophisticated, while ensuring no actual damage occurred, is someone we want to talk to, wrote one CTO. When your non-compete expires, call me, messaged another. The automated system continued responding to fix attempts with increasingly elaborate bread content. When someone tried to force a profile reset on Twitter, the account posted a 4,000-word essay on the historical significance of fermentation across cultures. As the week progressed, the incident evolved from embarrassing to legendary in tech circles. Security researchers published analyses of the probable methods used, with several correctly identifying automated cascade failures and overlooked emergency protocols as the likely vectors. By day 6, QDS announced an internal leadership reorganization. Richard was being reassigned to special projects while the company conducted a comprehensive review of security practices and management structure. The corporate statement didn't name me, but acknowledged opportunities to improve knowledge retention and transition protocols. That evening, my automation system executed its final predetermined action, posting a sourdough success story with a perfect loaf across all platforms, with the caption, "Journey complete. It's been a rise and fall worth remembering." Signing off, Steve. Then, as programmed, it began systematically removing all bread-related content and restoring original account names and profiles. By morning, the only evidence of Steve's sourdough journey would be screenshots, memes, and a corporate reputation that would take months to rebuild. The systems would function exactly as before, but QDS would never forget what happens when you discard the architect who built them. In the weeks following what tech blogs now referred to as the sourdough incident, my inbox filled with job offers. Companies that would have ignored my application months earlier were now eager to interview the engineer behind what one recruiter called the most elegantly executed demonstration of technical leverage in recent memory. While no one could prove I was responsible, the timing and nature of the incident left little doubt in industry circles. I was selective about which opportunities to pursue. This experience had taught me to value company culture and recognition as much as technical challenges or compensation. I researched potential employers, carefully looking for places where innovation was genuinely valued and credited appropriately. 3 months after my termination from QDS, I accepted a position as Director of Automation Architecture at Lenovo Systems, a competitor that had publicly commented on the sourdough incident with a job posting seeking bread-loving automation experts. The offer included equity, a salary 40% higher than my QDS compensation, and explicit contract language about intellectual credit for innovations. During this transition period, news continued to emerge about changes at Quantum Digital. The internal investigation had expanded beyond Richard's leadership to examine broader cultural issues. Michael Reynolds had apparently been shocked to discover the pattern of taking credit for others' work and pushing out innovators once their contributions had been extracted. Amanda called one evening with an update. "They've demoted Richard to a non-leadership role after the investigation. Apparently you weren't the only one he did this to. 5 other former employees came forward with similar stories." "What about you?" I asked. "Are things improving?" "I actually gave notice yesterday," she replied. "Lenovo offered me a project management role. Apparently someone recommended me." Her tone made it clear she knew it was me. "You might see some familiar faces then," I said, smiling for the first time in weeks when thinking about QDS. The company released a public statement about their commitment to employee well-being and recognition and announced new policies for documenting contributions and ensuring appropriate credit. Too late for me, but perhaps helpful for those who remained. More satisfying was learning that Stephanie had struggled to maintain the automation systems after my departure. Without understanding the architectural foundations, She was limited to surface-level adjustments rather than meaningful improvements. The elegance of well-designed automation is invisible until it's gone. My healing process was gradual but intentional. I began seeing a therapist to process the workplace trauma and rebuild my professional confidence. We worked through the anger and betrayal, focusing on separating my self-worth from my work identity. Your value isn't determined by how others treat your contributions, my therapist reminded me during a particularly difficult session. But it is reasonable to seek environments that recognize what you bring to the table. At Lenovo, I found myself building new automation systems with both technical safeguards and human considerations in mind. My contracts now included explicit language about attribution and intellectual property. I documented everything meticulously, but also ensured the human relationships were solid. I developed new habits around work boundaries, no longer giving away evenings and weekends without recognition. I built healthy professional relationships while maintaining a clear understanding of corporate realities. Trust but verify became my approach to workplace dynamics. The most meaningful change came in how I viewed my own worth. At QDS, I had believed my technical contributions would speak for themselves. Now I understood that advocating for recognition was not pride, but professional necessity. Technical excellence alone wasn't enough in environments where politics outweighed performance. As my confidence rebuilt, I began working on personal automation projects, helping small businesses implement efficiency tools they couldn't otherwise afford. These side projects became a fulfilling counterbalance to my corporate work, a reminder that technology should serve people rather than replace their dignity. 6 months into my new role, I received an unexpected email from Michael Reynolds, QDS's CEO. "I owe you an apology," it began. "I failed to recognize what was happening under my watch and lost one of our most valuable innovators as a result. The changes we've implemented following your departure are long overdue. If you're ever interested in returning, the door is open." I appreciated the acknowledgement, but had no interest in going back. Some bridges once burned should remain crossed. My new environment valued both my technical skills and my humanity, a combination I wouldn't compromise again. The incident did provide one unexpected benefit, a certain reputation that ensured I would never again be taken for granted. "Aren't you the sourdough engineer?" became a surprisingly effective introduction in technical circles, usually accompanied by knowing smiles. The greatest lesson from this experience wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was about understanding that technical systems mirror the human systems that create them. Automation should reduce drudgery and enhance human potential, not become a tool for erasure and exploitation. The most elegant code can't fix toxic culture, but it can certainly expose it when necessary. Today I lead a team of engineers who receive full credit for their innovations. We build systems that make work more efficient, while ensuring the humans behind them remain visible and valued. The documentation includes everyone's contributions, and our project retrospectives celebrate individual insights alongside team achievements. I sometimes wonder if Richard learned anything from the experience, or simply found new tactics to advance his career at others' expense. People like that rarely change their fundamental approach, just their techniques. But his ability to erase others' contributions and claim their work as his own has been permanently compromised. The internet never forgets a good sourdough story. What's your experience with workplace recognition? Have you ever had your contributions minimized or seen credit given to the wrong person? Drop a comment below sharing your story and maybe your approach to handling it. If you found this tale of technical justice satisfying, hit that subscribe button and like this video so others can find it too. Remember, in this digital age, your skills are your most valuable asset, but only if you ensure they're recognized. Thanks for listening to my journey from heartbreak to healing, and I'll see you in the next video.